Welcome to Sleepy Bedtime Stories, your quiet place to relax, unwind, and fall gently into sleep. Here, you'll find calming stories told in soft voices, crafted to ease your mind and carry you into dreamland. Whether you're resting after a long day or just need a peaceful moment to yourself, you're in the right place. So get cozy, take a deep breath, and let the stories begin. Subscribe now and sleep well. The wind outside was gentle, brushing through the tall prairie grass like a whisper. Night had already laid its soft blue curtain across the land, and the stars, patient and bright, had begun their slow dance above the rolling hills. A narrow dirt path curved toward the old farmhouse, where a warm light glowed through the windows like the last ember of a fading fire. The farmhouse had stood there since 1872, built with sturdy hands and slow care, plank by plank, from the very wood of the nearby forest. Its walls were thick and held stories within them, quiet stories of rainstorms, summer laughter, and the peaceful hum of a life lived simply. The front porch stretched wide, with two wooden rocking chairs gently swaying in the cool night air, as if moved by the memory of someone who used to sit in them. Inside, the scent of freshly baked cornbread still lingered in the air, mixing with the faint sweetness of apples from the pie cooling on the windowsill. The floors creaked softly under each step, a familiar sound that never startled, only comforted. It was the kind of creak that told you the house was alive in its own way, like an old friend settling in for the night. A narrow hallway led to a sitting room warmed by a stone fireplace. The fire had been lit just after sundown, and now the flames had softened, their light flickering gently against the faded floral wallpaper. Above the mantel, an old black and white photograph rested in a hand-carved wooden frame. Two children sitting on the same porch decades ago, grinning with missing teeth and messy hair. On the mantel beside them stood a candle, its flame steady and calm. The chairs in the room were hand-built, trocking slightly, worn smooth by generations of use. A thick braided rug lay underfoot, its once bright colors now muted by time. Every detail in the room whispered of care. Quilts folded neatly in a corner basket, a sewing needle still threaded on a small cushion, and books with cracked spines stacked on a low table. Nothing matched perfectly, and yet everything belonged. In the kitchen, which was open to the room, cast iron pans hung neatly on the wall, their dark surfaces polished by use. A small jar of preserves, peach and blueberry, rested near the sink, beside a cup still warm from herbal tea. The clock above the stove ticked quietly. It didn't chime or clang, it just ticked, steady, like a heartbeat. The windows were tall and simple, dressed in lace curtains that fluttered now and then when the wind found its way in through tiny gaps in the wood. Outside those windows, the world seemed to slow down. The barn across the field had been locked for the night. The animals settled into their straw beds. Chickens huddled close on their roost. The horse stretched his neck out, already drifting into sleep. Only the soft lowing of a cow now and then broke the stillness, like a lullaby too tired to finish its song. Upstairs, the bedrooms were quiet, bathed in moonlight and shadows. Each room was small, but full of comfort. Worn wooden dressers, white lace doilies, hand-sewn curtains, every piece had a story. The beds, tall and soft, were covered in thick quilts stitched long ago by hands that had passed on, but whose love still warmed the fabric. A small child's room had a single window that looked out to the field. The stars outside blinked kindly, as if offering stories of their own. A stuffed cloth bear sat near the pillow, its seams worn thin. A book rested beside it, closed now, its tail paused until the next night. The room smelled faintly of cedarwood and of sleep. There was no hum of appliances, no glow of blue screens, only silence and the soft rhythm of life as it used to be, low, mindful, unhurried. Somewhere downstairs, a kettle clicked as it cooled. A floorboard creaked under no particular weight. The fire in the hearth sighed as it lowered itself to embers. The house didn't need noise to speak. It breathed comfort in every beam and board, its age a gentle reminder that not everything in the world moves quickly. Outside, the wind rolled softly over the fields, brushing the leaves of the trees with a hush. An owl hooted once, then again, low and even, its call fading into the quietness of the woods. In the distance, the creek behind the orchard murmured as it always did, winding slowly between rocks and moss, unchanged for decades. Fireflies blinked low near the tall grass, their soft yellow glow drifting upward like pieces of sleep floating through the air. Back inside, the house had nearly gone still. The last candle was blown out, its smoke curling into the dark like a sigh. The family lay tucked into their beds, the weight of hand-sewn blankets pressing just enough to remind them of comfort and safety. One by one, the lights of thought dimmed in their minds. The room, the house, the fields beyond, all sank into a soft quiet. It was the kind of night that asked nothing of you. No worry, no movement, just stillness. The farmhouse, like the land around it, had settled into its rhythm, into a sleep older than memory, deeper than words. It didn't try to rush the night or chase the morning. It simply rested. And in that stillness, in that quiet lull of wind and wood and time, sleep gently covered every heart inside with its softest blanket. And the night, now full and silent, held them close. The sun had long dipped below the trees, and the sky had turned a soft, sleepy shade of navy blue. A few stars blinked above the farmhouse, and the scent of fresh hay and baked bread still hung in the cool evening air. Inside, the house moved gently into its nighttime rhythm, one that hadn't changed much over the years. In the kitchen, the mother stood near the wood, burning stove, wiping her hands on a worn cloth. The last of the dinner dishes had been washed and set aside to dry on a wooden rack by the window. The soft clinking of tin plates and porcelain bowls had faded now, replaced by the steady scrape of a broom across the floor. She moved slowly, not out of tiredness, but with a kind of peaceful purpose, as though each sweep of the bristles was as much a part of bedtime as tucking in the children. The scent of the evening meal lingered, roasted vegetables from the garden, hot cornbread cooked in a cast-iron skillet, and a hint of fresh butter that had melted just right. The pie cooling on the sill was for tomorrow, though its sweet apple, cinnamon fragrance mixed quietly with the clean scent of lye soap and old wood. The father, with his sleeves rolled to his elbows, had just returned from the barn. The door creaked gently as he came in, the lantern in his hand glowing a soft orange. He placed it on the table and took a long breath, the kind that came at the end of a good day. His boots, dusty and worn, left faint prints on the floorboards as he made his way to the basin to wash. The cold water splashed softly as he cleaned the hay from his hands and arms. He didn't speak much, he didn't need to. The rhythm of the house said everything. In the front room, the children moved quietly. A small boy, maybe 7, sat cross-legged on the braided rug, lining up his wooden blocks in a row, his eyes beginning to droop even as he built. His sister, just a bit older, had already brushed her hair and was gently folding a nightdress for her doll. Their movements were slow, unhurried, as if they understood the night had arrived and there was no need to rush anymore. There was no school tomorrow, no errands, only the soft unfolding of another quiet night. Their mother called them softly, her voice like a lullaby in itself, and they stood without protest, upstairs the washed, and waited with a small bowl of warm water. The children took turns rinsing their hands and faces, drying off with soft cotton towels that smelled faintly of lavender. The girl pinned back her hair with the same 2 clips she used every night, and the boy slipped into a thick flannel nightshirt that brushed against his ankles. The hallway upstairs was dim, lit only by the glow of a single oil lamp resting on a small table near the stairs. Shadows stretched along the walls, but they weren't frightening, they were familiar. A rocking chair in the corner creaked slightly when the wind passed through a small gap in the window frame. The house settled into its old bones, every creak and sigh like a gentle reminder that it, too, was winding down for the night. Downstairs, the father had placed a few more pieces of wood into the fire. He sat in his chair, the one with the worn arms and the soft cushion, and let his eyes close for a moment. The fire crackled low, sending little orange sparks dancing up the chimney. The room smelled faintly of pine smoke and wool. Their mother came up the stairs carrying the folded quilts. She laid one over each child's bed, tucking them in with a care that didn't change, no matter how many times she'd done it. Her hands were gentle, practiced, always pulling the corners just right. The children didn't speak much. They knew what came next. She sat on the edge of the bed and reached for the small cloth-bound book that rested on the nearby shelf. Its pages were worn, the edges softened from use, and the spine cracked just slightly from years of opening and closing. She opened it slowly and began to read, her voice low and even. The story was a simple one about a squirrel and a snowstorm, about gathering acorns, about finding warmth. But it wasn't the plot that mattered. It was the way her voice filled the room, the way the words drifted through the air like falling leaves, steady and soft. Outside the window, the wind sighed against the glass. Inside, the warmth of the beds and the cadence of her voice wove sleep into every corner. After the story ended, she kissed their foreheads, smoothing back hair and pulling quilts higher over small shoulders. She whispered something, maybe a prayer or a wish, or perhaps just their names said softly in the way only a mother can. Then she stepped back, careful not to make a sound, and left the door open just a crack. Downstairs, the father had risen from his chair and begun snuffing out the candles. One by one, the little flames disappeared, replaced by the soft gray shadows of night. He took the lantern in his hand again and climbed the stairs, the boards beneath him groaning faintly in welcome. In their bedroom, he placed the lantern on a dresser and began unbuttoning his shirt. The mother was already pulling back the quilt on their bed, folding it down with the same care she gave the children's. The house was nearly silent now, with only the smallest sounds remaining the slow crackle of a dying fire, the wind brushing against the eaves, and the faint tick of the kitchen clock below. These were the sounds the family knew by heart, sounds that had rocked them to sleep since before the children could speak. In the darkness, the farmhouse embraced them all. The routines, unchanged by time, unfolded like a lullaby written in footsteps and flickering light. There were no alarms, no bright lights, no need for rushing. Just breathe and warmth and the slow turning of night toward morning. And so, as the last lamp was dimmed and the weight of the day gave way to the lightness of dreams, the house exhaled once more. Outside, the stars watched over them in silence. Sleep came gently, just as it always had. As the farmhouse settled into stillness, the night outside slowly opened up its quiet symphony. It was not a loud or grand performance. Rather, it was the kind of music that you didn't notice right away, soft, constant, and old, like something that had always been there. The wind was the first to arrive. It moved through the tall grass in the field, brushing the stalks gently, as though stroking the earth with a mother's hand. It passed through the orchard behind the barn, lifting the leaves just enough to make them whisper. It rattled the weathered shutters on the house with a sound that was both hollow and comforting, like an old friend tapping to say, "I'm still here." The crickets began their chorus just after the sun had disappeared behind the hills. Their song wasn't sharp or hurried, it came in waves, a steady, scratchy lull that filled the spaces between the silence. Some chirped low and slow, others a little higher, but all of them sang together, each tiny voice adding its own layer to the night's rhythm. It was a sound that had always been a part of summer evenings in the countryside, familiar and soothing, a reminder that life continued on outside even as the people inside lay down to sleep. From the woods beyond the pasture, an owl called out. Its voice echoed once, twice low and even, a slow hoo that drifted across the field like fog. The children upstairs barely stirred when they heard it. They had heard the owl before, many times, and to them it was no more frightening than the ticking of a clock. The owl, with its slow, steady call, was a guardian of sorts keeping watch while the family slept. Near the barn, a cow gave a low moan, not loud or distressed, just a quiet sound as it shifted in the straw. A chicken rustled in the coop, feathers brushing against feathers. Somewhere under the floorboards, a field mouse made a tiny scurry quick, light gone again before it could be heard twice. But even these movements didn't disturb the peace. They were part of it. The whole world seemed to move just enough to remind you it was alive, but not so much that it would ever wake you. Inside the house, the fire had nearly gone out. A few glowing coals remained in the hearth, but the wood no longer crackled. Still, every so often, one would let out a soft sigh, a faint pop like it, too, was turning over in its sleep. The scent of smoke, warm and woody, hung in the air like a blanket that had wrapped itself around the whole room. The old clock in the kitchen kept ticking. Its gears moved with the quiet confidence of something that had ticked for decades. It didn't chime on the hour. Not at night, it simply kept time. Each click a heartbeat that counted down the hours until morning. If you listened closely, you could hear the pendulum swing back and forth, soft and even, like a lullaby written in seconds. The stairs, too, had a sound, even when no one was on them. Just a faint settling, as if the wood remembered the feet that had walked them earlier, and was now relaxing into its own slumber. The whole house creaked from time to time, not in protest, but in comfort like bones stretching out beneath a heavy quilt. Every creak was familiar. It told you that the house was still there, still holding everything safe inside. On the front porch, the rocking chairs moved now and then, pushed by the breeze that had snuck through the gaps between the boards. They rocked just a little, not enough to make a sound you could measure, but enough that if you were listening, truly listening, you might hear the soft brush of wood against wood. It was a sound that made you think of summer afternoons long past, of sweet tea in mason jars, of stories told without hurry. Out back, the creek that ran behind the trees whispered over the rocks. Its voice was constant, gentle water meeting stone, moving just fast enough to be heard. Sometimes it gurgled, sometimes it hummed, but always in the same low tone. If you had lived in the farmhouse long enough, you might recognize its patterns. You'd know how it sounded after a rain, how it softened in drought, how it never stopped, even in winter. Tonight, it sang its usual tune calm and flowing, lulling everything nearby into quietness. And the fireflies, though they made no sound, they added to the rhythm of the night all the same. Their little lights blinked slowly near the tall grass, rising and falling like tiny lanterns held by invisible hands. One would glow, then fade. Another would light up a few feet away. It was like watching the stars drift downward to walk among the earth. No buzz, no hum, just light, soft and living. The night had no hurry. It moved at its own pace, stretching out like a deep breath. Nothing pushed it forward. Nothing needed to happen. It was the time between things, between days, between dreams, where everything simply rested. In their beds, the children were still. The girl had curled into her blanket, her breath quiet and deep. The boy's hand rested over the edge of the bed, fingers just brushing the wooden frame. Their dreams had already begun to take shape, sparked by the fire's glow, the owl's call, the soft ticking below. There were no nightmares in this house, not tonight. Only the kind of sleep that arrives slowly, kindly, without ever needing to be chased. And through it all, the night continued to sing not with loud voices, but with a hush, with the soft shuffle of leaves, the breath of wind, the quiet rustle of life all around. It was a lullaby of a different kind. One written in nature, in history, in the way time slows down when the world is no longer watching. Everything that needed to be said had already been spoken. Everything that needed to be done had already been done. And so the night held the house gently in its arms and rocked it, slowly, softly, until morning would come again. The fire had almost gone out now. Only the faintest glow remained deep in the hearth, flickering behind a screen of ash and ember. It cast soft shadows on the walls, orange and gold and fading, like sunlight that had traveled too far. In the quiet farmhouse, the glow reached out like an old memory, slow, gentle, and full of warmth. The children had come downstairs earlier that evening after slipping into their nightclothes, cotton, soft, well worn, and freshly washed. They were sleepy, but not too sleepy for one more story. It was a tradition every night, just before the house fell completely still, one story by the fire. No books this time, just a voice and the hush of the house listening. Their mother had settled into the big rocking chair near the fireplace. She always rocked just a little, back and forth, never fast, just enough to set the rhythm of her story. Her voice, low and calm, wrapped around the room like another blanket. The children sat close, legs curled under them, heads resting on each other's shoulders. The dog, old and content, lay curled at their feet, his breath slow and deep. Tonight's story was one they had heard before, an old tale, passed down by her grandmother, and probably her grandmother before that. It wasn't written in any book. It lived in the voice, in the pauses, in the quiet laughter that came at the same spot every time. It was about a little girl named Clara who lived in a cabin not so different from theirs, tucked away in the hills of Kentucky. Clara was curious and kind, with a wide straw hat and a basket she carried everywhere. The story told how one spring morning, Clara followed a bluebird deep into the forest, farther than she had ever gone before. She didn't mean to get lost, but lost she got. The forest wasn't frightening in the story. It was wide and quiet and full of strange, lovely things. A turtle who knew how to hum, a fox who had once been a farmer, a squirrel who offered her a single acorn and told her to plant it when she felt alone. The tale wasn't really about danger. It was about discovery. About how sometimes getting lost is just another way to learn where you belong. The fire popped gently as their mother spoke, each crackle like punctuation at the end of a sentence. The children's eyes blinked slower now, their hands still, their breathing deepening with every word. They knew the story, but that didn't matter. In fact, it made it better. They waited for their favorite parts, the hollow log she crawled through, the mossy rock shaped like a chair, the moment she found her way back home, holding that single sprouted acorn in her basket. Their father listened too, sitting quietly in the chair across the room. He didn't speak, didn't interrupt. His eyes were half closed, and the firelight danced across the silver at his temples. He had heard the story just as many times as the children, maybe more. But still he listened, because the story wasn't just for the children. It was for the house, for the memory of voices in rooms like these, stories told when there wasn't much else to do but listen. As the story came to its quiet end, Clara planting her sprouted acorn and watching it grow into a strong little tree, the room seemed to breathe. No applause, no questions, just silence. The kind of silence that follows something sacred. Their mother leaned forward and brushed a curl behind her daughter's ear, then gave her son's shoulder a squeeze. Time to go back up, she said softly. No one argued. The children rose slowly. The boy took the lantern, and his sister took his hand. Together, they padded up the stairs, not hurried, not sleepy in the clumsy way, but dreamy, floating, as if the story had gently lifted them toward sleep and would carry them the rest of the way. Their footsteps faded. A door clicked shut. Upstairs, beds creaked as blankets were pulled tight and pillows were fluffed, and then quiet. Downstairs, the fireside again, a soft glow, a final ember. The mother sat a moment longer in the chair, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were distant, soft. Perhaps she was remembering when she had first heard that story. Maybe it was a cold winter night, and her own mother was sitting in that chair, or one just like it, telling her the tale of Clara and the bluebird. Outside, the wind had settled, the world was sleeping. The trees barely moved, the fields rested in darkness, and even the barn was quiet now. The owl had flown deeper into the woods. The crickets chirped softer, slower. It was the deep night, the kind that holds time still. The mother stood finally and placed a screen in front of the hearth. The last embers faded behind it, their light dim but still warm. She blew out the lantern, the soft puff of her breath, the last sound in the room. And then the house, wrapped in its stories, sank fully into sleep. The house was completely still now, not the kind of stillness that feels empty or cold, but a deep, peaceful hush like a long exhale after a day well lived. Upstairs, beneath hands, stitched quilts, and worn linen sheets, the children had long since drifted into sleep. Their breathing had settled into a quiet rhythm, rising and falling like waves on a distant shore. In their dreams, the world was wide and kind. It didn't rush or press or push, it simply opened up, like a field stretching out under morning mist. Dreams for them were gentle things. Not loud, not bright, but soft-edged and calm, filled with fragments of the stories they'd heard, the games they'd played, the people they loved. Maybe the boy was dreaming of Clara and the bluebird, following a trail of glowing stones through the wood. Maybe his sister dreamed she was a squirrel in a high tree, leaping from branch to branch above the roof of the farmhouse. Maybe their dreams were less like pictures and more like feelings, that strange warmth you get when someone remembers your name, or the way you feel when the wind tugs your hair and whispers that everything's going to be all right. These dreams didn't need sense. They didn't follow the rules of daytime. They curved and twisted gently, like smoke rising from the last of the fire. One moment, a pond full of stars. The next, a parade of laughing animals marching through the living room. The rules of gravity didn't apply. Time didn't tick, it drifted. And in that drifting space, the children rested. Their parents, too, were dreaming, though grown-up dreams are quieter. Not always stories, sometimes just the memory of a voice long gone, or the image of a porch in summer light, or the way it felt to be held as a child. Dreams for grown-ups often carried the weight of remembering, but tonight, even those dreams were light. The parents dreamed in soft colors, in hushed tones, in thoughts that didn't need words. Outside, the world dreamed too. The fields held the night like a promise, the grass silver in the moonlight. The barn, its doors shut tight, stood watch like it always had. Inside, animals stirred in their sleep. A horse shifted its weight. A hen ruffled her feathers. But even they were dreaming in their own way of open pastures, of clear skies, of hands that fed and cared without asking for anything back. The trees dreamed in slow time, each leaf and branch part of something older than the farmhouse itself. Their roots stretched deep into the earth, touching memories from centuries before. The creek behind the house whispered over smooth stones, telling stories of rainstorms and melting snow and children who once built tiny bridges from twigs and moss. In the sky, the stars blinked slowly, watching over everything. Some were just arriving their light, having traveled hundreds of years, while others had been there since the first story was ever told. They didn't shout or boast, they simply shimmered, quiet, steady, like they understood the importance of silence. And in that silence, something else happened. A kind of reflection. Not the kind you see in a mirror, but the kind that grows in the space between waking and sleep. The kind that lets you look inward not with judgment, but with understanding. The children, though too young to know it, were remembering little things from their day. The warmth of the sun on their backs, the feeling of dirt between their fingers when they helped in the garden, the sound of laughter at the dinner table when their father made that silly joke. These memories folded into their dreams like soft fabric, wrapping around them and reminding them they were safe. They were loved for their parents. The reflection was deeper. Thoughts of the work they had done that day, mending fences, kneading dough, wiping down shelves, comforting a child, turned over gently in their minds. There was satisfaction in it. Not pride, exactly, but peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've cared for something that matters. From living a day that was quiet, steady, and true. Even the house reflected. Its walls held voices, laughter, footsteps, lullabies. It had heard sorrow too, over the years, the kind that visits every family, but it remembered the joy more clearly. Tonight it was content. Its windows fogged slightly in the cool air, its floorboards relaxed, its rooms warm from the fire's memory. If houses dream, then this one surely dreamed of children running in spring, of flower, dusted aprons, of candlelight, of stories by the hearth. This was not a night of restless turning, not a night of worries or clocks or lists. It was a night of deep stillness where the past and present met and held hands, where dreams were soft enough to carry sadness, but strong enough to carry hope. And in the quietest part of the night, that time when even the stars seemed to pause, the world exhaled. Not a sound, just presence, just peace. Morning was still far away, but it would come as it always did with its soft light, its rooster's crow, its fresh bread, its chatter and chores and beginnings, but not yet, not now. Now there was only sleep, the kind that heals, the kind that remembers, the kind that dreams. Before the rooster crowed, before the alarm clocks or the creak of floorboards, the morning began in stillness. It always started the same way as it had for generations in quiet American farmhouses and small townhomes, not with sound, but with light. The first light didn't burst in all at once. It crept gently across the floor like a guest who didn't want to wake anyone. It pressed softly against the curtains, turning the darkness a gentle gray, then a quiet blue, then something like gold. In the upstairs bedroom, the children were still sleeping, their bodies curled like commas under the warm patchwork quilts. Their breath was slow and even, rising and falling with the rhythm of a night's worth of dreaming. One of them shifted, just a little, the way you do when the light finds your closed eyes, but you're not ready to leave your dream just yet. The birds were the first to speak, not loudly, just a few notes, shy and curious, one here, then another farther off. They didn't sing a full song right away. They tested the day like someone dipping a toe into a pond. And the morning answered. The wind that had slept against the barn stirred and moved through the grass. The old oak tree by the well shook its leaves, brushing off the night like dust from its shoulders. Back inside, the kitchen still sat in quiet shadow. The clock above the stove ticked softly, always on time, never rushed. A bowl rested in the sink, left from last night's supper. The kettle waited on the stove, cold for now. A single plate sat drying by the window, catching the first thread of daylight as it brightened a peach. Down the hallway, the grown-ups stirred. The father's boots rested by the door, waiting to be filled. The mother's apron hung from its usual hook. She rose first, always had. Her steps were soft against the wooden floor, practiced from years of rising before the sun. She didn't turn on the lights, she never did. She knew the house better in the dark than most people know their homes in daylight. She filled the kettle, placed it over the flame, and lit the stove with a match that hissed and flared, then fell to quiet again. The fire was low and steady, and soon the faint whistle of the kettle would follow the only real sound so far. Outside, the dew clung to everything. Each blade of grass held a tiny bead of silver, and the fence posts glistened as though the night had left them small gifts. The earth felt clean, untouched, as if it had just been made again. The animals sensed the shift too. In the barn, the horse snorted gently, stepping once in her stall. The cows blinked slowly, chewing lazily, their breath rising in warm clouds. The chickens murmured to each other quiet, feathery conversations about nothing in particular. They weren't eager to rush the day. They, too, understood that morning was meant to be eased into. The rooster, dependable and proud, waited just a moment longer. And then he crowed, not once, not loud, just a clear, rising call that rolled across the pasture and down the dirt road. It echoed faintly off the woods, circled the farmhouse, and found its way into every window and every dream still lingering in the children's mind. Upstairs, the boy rubbed his eyes and sat up slowly. He looked toward the window, where the curtain had shifted slightly in the breeze. The world outside was now bathed in light, not full sun yet, but a soft, golden promise of it. He yawned, scratched his head, and stretched his arms as the quilt fell to his lap. His sister blinked awake too, silent for a moment, caught between her dream and the day. Neither one spoke right away. They never did, they just listened to the low hum of the stove below, to the call of birds at the window, to the whisper of wind through the trees, to the house alive, gentle, and waking. Downstairs, the mother poured the hot water into 2 mugs, hers and her husband. The smell of morning coffee rose into the air, slow and rich. She cracked an egg into a cast iron pan, the sound of it soft and perfect. A loaf of bread waited to be sliced, butter waiting in its dish. The kitchen, filled with so many quiet things, began to warm with life. Soon the father joined her, a hand on her shoulder, a nod, no need for words just yet. The kind of silence they shared came from years of rising together, moving through the same rhythm day after day. It was not emptiness, it was knowing. The children came down a little later, sleepy-eyed, sock-footed. The dog padded behind them, tail swaying, eyes half closed. The house filled slowly with voices, now low ones, sleepy ones, quiet laughter that bubbled up over the first bites of breakfast. Outside, the sun lifted a little higher. The clouds, thin and stretched across the horizon, glowed like they'd been lit from within. The barn door creaked open, the hens fluttered down from their roosts, and a wheelbarrow rolled down the worn path toward the field. The day had begun, but even now, with life returning to the house and land, the memory of night still clung gently to the edges. The kind of memory that reminded you not everything had to move quickly. That the best parts of life often happen in the in-between, the first stretch, the first breath, the first bit of light finding your face after a long, peaceful sleep. The morning didn't arrive all at once. It unfolded like a story, like a promise, like home.